What's going on, Fourth and Inches podcast listeners? You got Dan, Kevin, Stevie P coming at you once again. What's going on, fellas?
What's going on, y'all? What's going on? What's going on, Dan?
Good. So today, once again, we're going to continue our divisional breakdowns. We're going to talk about the NFC South. Pretty good division. A few high-powered offenses. The Bucs have been one of those teams that have kind of been at the bottom the last few years, so they're trying to make their way back. But if you look, Panthers are in the Super Bowl recently. Saints have been pretty much a playoff team every year since Drew Brees, and the Falcons are pretty much on and off, and they're always a competitive team, especially with that offense. So pretty good division to break down. But first, before we get into it, remind you guys, if you're listening, check out the website. It is www.fourthandinchesff.com. It is www.4thandinchesff.com. A bunch of articles, bunch of blogs on there. We got our player profiles, and then you can subscribe to our draft guide, which features the decision maker, basically a tiered out system from 3 different approaches. If you're a risky drafter, there's a tier for that. If you're a conservative guy, there's a there for that. And then we got one that's pretty much a tweener in between the two. So check that out. And we also got the cheat codes on there. The cheat codes are a visual breakdown of everybody's offensive stats from last year. You got your departures and your additions to the team on there. A lot of information on these cheat codes. It's going to give you everything you need to win your championships this year. So check that out, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button there and give us a 5-star review so you can stay in touch with us. So with that said, let's move on to the Atlanta Falcons. That'll be our first team that we're going to go over here. So we'll start with Matt Ryan, last year's number 2 quarterback in fantasy. He had an excellent year. I think a lot of it had to do with the lack of a run game, missing Devontae Freeman. But, still, Matt Ryan finished number 2 last year, and he seems to be an on and off year guy. Steve's talked about that before. How do you guys feel about Matt Ryan going into this year? Does he kind of keep that same pace, or do you think that he's going to drop off a little bit?
Yeah, like I said, he's been an on and off quarterback, so if you follow that trend, he is not going to be good this year, is basically the way it's been. But I would say I like this offense. I just think this is a very good offense with an offensive line that should be good. They as we all know, they took 2 rookies in the first round, both of them offensive linemen. So, it sounds to me like they really wanted to put a emphasis on the offensive line to try to help Matt Ryan out. When you take an offensive guard in Chris Lindstrom and then a right tackle in Caleb McGarry, both of those guys were dominant in college. So, to me, it's definitely a offensive line on the rise. And if they can keep him upright, then this sky's the limit for this offense. You got Julio Jones, who we all know is just an absolute animal. You have Calvin Ridley, who really showed something last year. He really showed that he could be, the heir apparent to Jones when he retires. Mohamed Sanu is still a good player. Austin Hooper, he caught 71 balls last year, which is great for your tight end, So, with a healthy Devontae Freeman, a good offensive line, this guy's the limit for what Matt Ryan can do. So I do like him this year. I'm scared of the on and off, switch that he seems to throw on every other year. But, in the same breath, this offense should be very good.
Yeah, I think I think this is the year he breaks the mold on that one, and I don't know if he's going to quite repeat his stats from last year or 3 years ago, which was his MVP year. But I think he definitely has a quality year. He's just got too much talent around him. When you have Julio Jones and now Calvin Ridley's just showing to be a potential star in the making, and Freeman, obviously one of the top running backs in the league. And Matt Ryan he's always been a good stat guy, 4,000 plus yards in just about every year he's been in the league. Matty Ice. He's always been a good quarterback. So I just think it would be. I think it's definitely more likely that he ends up on the higher end side of statistics with that kind of offense and the way that Atlanta's trending. So that's what I think. I don't see an off year. I mean, maybe not quite as productive. His stats last year were incredible. Maybe not quite second overall, but he's definitely top 5 potential.
Yeah, he definitely has top 5 potential. I have him number 6 in my rankings. Like you said, Dan, I think he's just got all the talent in the world around him. Julio Jones is, probably one of the most talented receivers. It's hard to say he's most talented with what Antonio Brown's done over the last 5 years, but he's definitely, top 5 in the league in wide receivers. And, you add Calvin Ridley. Hooper, that Steve brought up, was a very solid tight end option for him last year. And you still got Old Faithful Mohamed Sanu on the other side. So, he's got some weapons out there. He's got a good running back that can kind of take some pressure off him and can catch the ball. Devontae's pretty good out of the backfield, and Ito Smith showed to be pretty good out of the backfield catching the ball. So they got a couple guys that can really, catch the ball out of the backfield. A couple guys are going to help this guy on the outside. And, this team, I think, last year missed Devontae Freeman. Tevin Coleman didn't give him what they expected him or, thought that he would, which is probably one of the reasons why he's out of there. So you beef up that offensive line. You get a little more production out of Devontae Freeman. Remember, the defense had a ton of injuries very first week against Philly. They lost, I think, both of their safeties in that game, and I think they lost I think their defensive end went out in that game as well. So, they did 3 injuries pretty much, from then. I think they're Deion Jones was it Deion Jones that tore his ACL in that game?
Yes.
Or what?
Yep.
Yeah, so Deion Jones goes out for the year. And like I said, you had a couple other injuries that kind of forced them into a mode of where they couldn't stop anybody, which led to a lot more passing, which led to a lot of Matt Ryan stats. So I could see definitely a little regression, but I still have him in the top 6 just because there's way too much talent around him. So that's kind of our feelings on Matt Ryan. I want to start off on Devontae Freeman because I've been thinking a lot about Devontae Freeman. Devontae Freeman has top 5 upside. I mean, 3 years ago or 4 years ago, he was the number 1 running back in fantasy football. I believe it was 2015. He was number 1 running back in fantasy football. He's dealt with injuries here and there. I mean, 2 years or 3 years back when he was, when they went to the Super Bowl, stayed healthy all year pretty much and was a monster that year. I think last year his injury is kind of taking away from that. Last year, I believe he was kind of an end of the first round pick, somewhere around there. And now he's dropping into the 3rd round. We're kind of using that injury, but we're not really giving Leonard Fournette that same, that same hold on injury, or Dalvin Cook that same hold on injury. We're still, beefing these guys up based on their potential. And Devontae's kind of dropping. So he's kind of a guy I've been thinking about that I like drafting in that 3rd round, especially if I go wide receiver.
Yeah, I agree. I think Devontae is a talented back that is just been unlucky with injuries. He is a guy that, he is a guy that can definitely produce, and with no Tevin Coleman, the sky's the limit for what he can do if he gets the touches in that offense. Like I said earlier, the offensive line has been bolstered. The quarterback is, a potential Hall of Fame quarterback. It's, he has the weapons around him to be productive. The thing that worries me, like it worries everybody else, is the injuries. I don't rank for injuries, so I have him, higher this year. But in the same breath, my other worry with him is that the offensive line doesn't gel as quickly. You know what I mean? I think from watching, offensive lines, I think it's a little bit easier to pass block than it is to run block. for some offensive lines, and I have a feeling, especially for like rookies, because rookies, they want to get after it. They're overzealous. They haven't really learned the position yet, but they know they can. They know they're strong because obviously they are coming out of college for a reason. They're offensive linemen coming out of college, strong young kids want to show off their strength. So when they run block, they get after it. But when they pass block, they get after it. When they run block, they kind of are not. I don't know if it's 100% that they don't know what they're doing, or it's the scheme of the offensive line. But I don't know. It just seems to me that pass blocking is a little bit easier when you're coming into the NFL. It's just kind of make sure the guy don't get to the quarterback. Is where we're run blocking. You have guards pulling. You have a lot of moving parts in the run game that I think takes offensive linemen a little bit longer to get. So if the offensive line gels and they can get this offensive line working together immediately, I definitely see Devontae having a productive season. He's shown it before. He can be productive when he's given the opportunity, and I don't think he's going to lack for opportunity this year. Ito Smith is not somebody that I would consider a really, really good back. I would consider him just a jag, just a guy that's going to, take some work off of Devontae. And, Kadri Allison, you don't know what Kadri Allison is. In college he looked good, but, looking good in college and looking good in the NFL are two totally different things. So, we'll have to see. But I have a feeling that Devontae is going to have a bounce-back season and be very productive this year.
Yeah, I picked up Ito Smith last year when Devontae went down, and just was curious about the kid, wanted to see what he was made of. And he never really had any breakout games. He just was, 5-7 carries, 20-30 stat line, just very, very minimal. So I don't think he's going to take anything away from Devontae, like you said, Steve. Devontae's going to get the bulk of the load, and depending on where you look, he's 18 to some as high as like CBS has him, I think 24. So he really dropped in ADP. So there might not be a better running back with better value right now than him, because there's a lot of guys that I'm looking above him, in the rankings that I would rather have Freeman in an offense like Atlanta's. We talked about Matt Ryan, how good of a year he had because, he didn't have that running game. So I think it's going to be a little more balanced this year. And there's just there's a good chance that Freeman ends up top 5 potential.
Yeah, right now on the fantasy football calculator, he is the 33rd player off the board, which is the number 17 running back.
Yeah.
The 17th running back being drafted with number 1 upside, with top 5 upside. I wouldn't say he quite has number 1 upside, but
he's had big years. That year that you were talking about, Kev, he had 14 touchdowns and 1,600 all-purpose yards. That's a great year. That's why he's going into number 1 the following year.
Exactly, and that's the thing. He has a lot of talent. Shown he can do it. So, I'll be interested to see how he bounces back this year, but he's a guy I really like. Another guy I really like, I think anybody who watches football really likes, is Julio Jones. Steve, I'll let you start off here. I know you have Julio ranked as your number 1. I don't know if you changed it. I know we discussed it, but, talk about Julio. Why do you think he has the potential or will be the number 1 receiver this year?
After much deliberation and much trying to figure out what the hell I'm going to do with Julio, move him down, keep him where he is, I just can't move him. He's been number 1 in yards per route run for like the past 4 years in a row. To me, that's one of the best predictive stats to use. If you look at all the superstars in the NFL, they are all, DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, all the superstars, are really high, per route run. So basically what that stat is saying is for as many routes as they run, which we all know they run 1 billion routes because, superstars never get off the field as wide receivers. He has the highest number of yards per route run, which is it's impressive. And to do it I think it's either 4 out of the past 5 years or 3 out of the past 4, something like that. Either way, it that doesn't matter to me. Either way, he is crazy productive. You know what I mean? He just every year, he is a guy that's going to be heavily targeted in that offense. I don't care about Calvin Ridley. I don't care about Austin Hooper. I don't care about Devontae Freeman. To me, none of those guys take away from Julio. Julio is always going to be the main focus of that offense in the passing game. So I don't worry about him. He is trying to get a new contract. I don't really believe in the whole contract year stuff, but he's trying to get a new contract. He's been showing for years and years and years that he is just the most. So what Kev was saying earlier about you don't know if he's the best wide receiver. To me, he's the most dominant, and it's not close. He is 100% the most dominant wide receiver in football, and you just can't stop him. Antonio Brown, you could say the same thing, that you can't stop him, but there has been games where Antonio Brown has been slowed down by coverages that are thrown at him, and Julio really don't have those games. I mean, you look at Julio last year, I believe he had 8 or 10 games. 10 games. He had 10 games of 100 yards. At least 100 yards receiving. That's a record. He tied a record. I think the record is 11. So he basically almost tied the NFL record for most games with 100 yards. And the only 2 other players to do that are, I believe it was Megatron, obviously, because Megatron is probably, like I said, he's the most dominant wide receiver ever to me. And then Michael Irvin did it in, I believe it was like 95 or something like that. Michael Irvin did it. But, to have 100 yards receiving in 10 games in an NFL season, that doesn't happen often. You have to be a dominant receiver, and both the guys I named were dominant receivers, So Julio, to me, is he's the safest bet at wide receiver that you're going to get. You know what I mean? It's too hard to predict touchdowns, so I try not to. So as long as he is 1,500 to 1,800 receiving yards like he is every fucking year, he's going to be a top 3 to 5 wide receiver, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, when you're a unquestionable top 3 receiver for fantasy for however many years now, 6, 7 years, 5, 6, 7 years, you're a future Hall of Famer, and you used to go worse. Dominant. That's what he is. I mean, when you watch this guy, he's a physical freak. He doesn't have the swag, I guess you would say, that like maybe an Antonio Brown has, but the guy is consistent. Like, I feel like a lot of other stars, they will put up a pooper every once in a while, and you just don't see it out of Julio. I mean, he may not get the touchdowns, and that's the big knock that's going to be on fantasy. That's his only knock. If you put 4 more touchdowns, 5 more touchdowns a year on Julio, he is number 1 taken overall every single year. But that is the only knock on him. That's why people are going to take your Hopkins and your other receivers or Saquon before him, because they're not sure about the touchdowns. But I mean, he's incredible. Calvin Ridley's not going. I mean, Calvin Ridley's going to be a good player for a while, and he's going to get his touches, but he's not going to take away from Julio's. The only reason I put Julio right slim margin behind Hopkins is because I just think Hopkins has a little bit of an easier schedule. I mean, it really has nothing to do with talent for those two. I just think Hopkins has a little bit easier schedule than Atlanta does when I looked closely at it. So that's basically what broke it down for me. But number 1 overall upside for Julio Jones. Yes, this year. I'll give you my answer for next year. Yes, I'll give you my answer for the year after that. Yes. And until the guy shows any hope of slowing down, yeah, he's top 3 all day.
Yeah, last year, if you look at it, Julio actually, tied his most touchdowns in a season. His highest total was 8 back in 2015. Last year, he matched that with 8. That's kind of why I can't put him number 1. That's kind of the reason why. If it wasn't for that, he'd be my number 1 receiver all day. And I don't know, you always say touchdowns are an unpredictable stat, Steve, But when you look at that lack of touchdowns over that many years compared to some of these other players, I think it becomes more predictable. And Atlanta just has never really been very good in the red zone. You will go back to the playoff game against Philly when they, the year the Eagles won the Super Bowl. They were shut down on final play. Julio Jones, Jalen Mills knocks the ball away from Julio Jones. Crazy situation. They wind up starting the season off last year against Philly, and same thing. Last play of the game, they threw a ball to Julio Jones. Ronald Darby was covering him this time, and Ronald Darby makes the play and knocks him out of bounds. It was also the first drive that they had in the game. They went 4 and out. They wound up Devontae Freeman got stuffed on the goal line. So it's just a bad team in the red zone. Calvin Ridley scored a ton of touchdowns last year for them, but a lot of those were big plays. I mean, I remember the one game, I think Calvin Ridley had like a 70-yarder and a 56-yarder in the same game.
Yeah, so, he had 3 in one game.
Yeah. So, I mean, most of his touchdowns were outside of red zone. It's just a team thing. And, Julio's a great receiver. He still, last year, was number 7, despite, only 8 touchdowns, which was out of those guys. I'm pretty sure it was probably at the bottom. I know Michael Thomas, I think, had 9, so I think that's actually kind of close. But he's still, if he can get into that double-digit touchdown mark, he is the number 1 receiver for sure. So now we'll get into the other receiver we've been discussing pretty frequently on the podcast, Calvin Ridley. Dan, I'll start with you. Like, do you think this is a year Calvin Ridley kind of breaks out? Last year, he pretty much did what he did off of touchdowns. He didn't really have a lot of big yardage games unless he was catching big plays, but a lot of it was off of touchdowns. How do you think Calvin Ridley kind of breaks out and comes back this season?
I think it's going to be a little bit of regression. I don't think he's going to have the touchdowns that he had, and I just think it's tough to put up big numbers when you're across from Julio Jones. I mean, he is Matt Ryan's safety net all day long. It's not going to change. They have a comfort between the two of them playing on the same team for so long now. And like I said, I do think Calvin Ridley is going to be a good player. He's going to be a solid NFL receiver, but I don't see that Pro Bowl stat line, from him until maybe down the road. But I just think the touchdowns he had was high. The yards he might have a little bit more, but I don't think he's gonna. He may end up in the same ballpark that he did last year, but I think a slight regression. But I'm big. I'm not down the guy. I'm just Julio's just a monster of a receiver, and when you're on the same team as him, you're not gonna get the amount of targets that you might need to get that next level.
Yeah, I agree. I think Calvin Ridley. I think Calvin Ridley had, we all know about that huge game he had. What was it? I think it was against the Saints. Was it against the Saints? He had the 3 touchdown game.
Against the Saints, 7 catches on 8 targets, 146 yards and 3 touchdowns. He had a 75-yarder, and it only says his longest here, but I'm pretty sure he also had a 50-yarder in the game as well.
Yeah, I know he had 2 huge plays.
Yeah, I could be.
So stats are inflated just a bit because of a monster game like that,
Exactly. So, I definitely think regression is coming for touchdowns. I don't see him having another double-digit touchdown season, especially because I have Julio at 1, and I think this could be the year that Julio gets double-digit touchdowns finally. But for me, Calvin Ridley is a player that will be better next year. I think he'll be a 3rd-year breakout and not a 2nd-year breakout. I think Julio is going to have the massive target share. I think that Calvin's targets might go up, but I think this is the last year of Sanu's deal, so I still think Sanu's going to be heavily targeted in this offense. I think him and Matt Ryan have a rapport, so I think that you're still going to get Sanu targets, you're still going to get Hooper targets. Freeman is going to get more targets out of the backfield. It's one of those things where there's too much going on for, I think, him to get a bigger workload than he saw last year. And if he does get a bigger workload than does last year, than he did last year. Like who does he take away from? He's not taking away from Julio. We can all agree on that he's not taking away from Julio. So, I think it's going to be one of those things where it is going to be him that loses out a little bit. So, I think next year is his year, not this year.
Especially with Devontae Freeman being healthy. If they can sustain that successful run game, Calvin Ridley now becomes the third option in the offense. I can actually see his targets going down simply because Sanu is still there. Hooper had a pretty good year last year, had some games where he showed that, he has a good chemistry with Matt Ryan. The problem was they just could not get their running game going. If they can get that running game going, this is kind of what we talked about with Matt Ryan. That's the only way his production really drops is if they get that running game going. And, if they get that running game going, there's obviously going to be less work work through the air, especially if the defense stays healthy as well. If defense stays healthy, they get the run game going. There's going to be a lot less going on through the air. Julio is not losing his targets, as we talked about. And, with Sanu still there, Hooper still there, I could actually see a big regression from Calvin Ridley. It maybe 10 catches and, 4 touchdowns. And that could literally drop him. Right now, I think he's going like the 5th, 6th round. He's just not really a guy I'm buying that high, especially since we're all seem to be high on Julio. If we're all high on Julio, I think it's hard to say Calvin Ridley is going to live up to a 5th-round draft pick.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Matt Kelly is somebody that I actually just started listening to. They call him the Pod Father. I started listening to him I think last week is the first time I downloaded this thing. But he actually said something that made a lot of sense. He was saying that regression for a lot of the younger guys is, especially guys that blow up in their first seasons that are not the first target on their team, regression is, kind of the way he worded it was regression is something that's going to happen. It's going to happen to those guys. And I definitely think a prime candidate for that is Calvin Ridley. He's just, to me, it's almost a slap you in the face. It's so obvious that regression's coming. Because, like Kev has said, Devontae Freeman's coming back. Hooper had a good season. I don't think Hooper gets less targets. I think, if anything, Hooper might get more targets. With a good running game and all that, getting in the red zone. Hooper was targeted, I believe it was the most on the team. I'll tell you right now, in the red zone. It was... Yeah, Austin Hooper had 10 targets inside the 10 and 7 targets inside the 10. So he had 10 targets, 7 receptions inside the 10. That's a lot. That's 3 more than any other wide receiver on the team. So, I think that's kind of where they're going to use him. So that
says a lot about Atlanta's offense right there, that Austin Hooper is getting more red zone targets than Julio Jones.
Yeah.
Just is a lot about Atlanta's red zone offense.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I watching the tape last year, because I had Julio in one of my dynasty leagues, and I was just like, why doesn't this dude catch touchdowns? And I watched 3 or 4 of his games really closely to see what's going on. They're doubling the shit out of him in the red zone. It's literally safety standing 2-3 feet behind the cornerback on left or right side, and they literally are bracket covering him inside the red zone. They're not letting him do shit. It's not a case where Julio. It's crazy because even Antonio Brown doesn't get the bracket coverage that Julio gets in the red zone.
They're giving him the Gronk call. I call that giving him the Gronk.
They are literally
yep. 3 guys blanketed. That's what they do with Gronk. There was 3 guys blanketed him every time. Red zone.
And that's exactly what they're doing to Julio. That's literally exactly what they're doing to him.
That's the thing. All right, us 3 can literally watch game film and see that. Move him around a little bit. Do a little bit of trickery. Do something to get the best one of the most talented wide receivers in the NFL. At least you said Hooper had 10 targets, and that was 3 more than any receiver. Was Julio next with 7?
Yes.
Okay, so you got to get to do more than 7 targets in the red zone. 7 targets in the red zone, it's unbelievable for top 5 wide receiver over the last 7 years. They got to, like I said, just says a lot about Atlanta's offense. There's no creativity, I'll say. It's just very steady, and I think that the talent kind of drives them. Mohamed Sanu, how do you guys feel? Late round flyer?
Yeah, I think if you need a wide receiver, see, he's not getting drafted. That's the thing. Mohamed Sanu is like almost not getting drafted. I think he might not be getting drafted. But
I don't think he is either. I just threw him out there because he's been, he's a guy that's been steady for the last couple of years. He's going to be a touchdown, and then he'll have his games where it's like one catch for 10 yards, and you're like, fuck, I started him in my flex. But, looking at it, I think there's other guys that if I'm down in that area, I'd rather take shots on, say, Deebo Samuel, Andy Isabella, Paris Campbell, if that's the area we're talking about. We're basically talking about these late round guys now. And I'm much rather taking flyers on these younger guys that have the ability to produce rather than a guy I pretty much know has almost, zero chance at blowing up, considering, the talent.
Yeah. 100% what you said. I mean, there's what you're going to get out of Sanu, so you're better off with some of these young guys with great upside, especially in a league like ours, which is a keeper league, where you can get one of these guys blows up, you can get him as a late rounder keeper. So yeah, Sanu he's not a guy I want to put a draft spot on for me.
Yeah, I mean, he's a guy that's going to be a waiver wire ad, and he's productive. He's not going to blow up like you guys said. He's not a superstar. He's not even a star. He's a good.
He's almost like a tight end that you're hoping they score a touchdown.
Yeah. I mean, he had 94 targets last year. He had 66 receptions. He had 838 yards. You know what I mean? He didn't. That's not bad numbers. That's not great numbers, but that's not bad numbers. And then what killed him was his touchdown. They only had 4. So, it's one of those things where if I have a couple of injuries and a bye week coming up and I don't have anybody to play, I don't mind picking up Mohamed Sanu and playing him for a week or two. Definitely not somebody I want in my starting lineup every week, but
exactly.
You pick him up and play him for bye weeks and he'll be fine. I mean, he's going to be he's going to be targeted. He's going to catch 40, 50 yards in a game. I mean, he's got to me, I think he's got a pretty safe floor. He's not going to kill you. He's not going to win you a game either.
Gotcha. All right, so Austin Hooper. Last year, I believe Austin Hooper was number 6 tight end in PPR leagues. Let me check to make sure I'm 100% accurate on that, guys. Yes, number 6. So obviously, I mean, nobody's drafting him as the number 6 tight end this year. He's definitely a guy that's going probably in that range of Greg Olsen and Kyle Rudolph, or who's the other? Trey Burton is in that area. I think Delaney Walker is probably a little higher. Austin Hooper, Steve, I know you've taken him in one of our recent mock drafts. How do you guys feel about Hooper?
Yeah, I like Austin Hooper. I think. All right, so I'm not going to say I think he has top 5 wide tight end upside because I don't, but I think he is a very solid. I think he's a very solid tight end. I think he will finish, anywhere from 6 to 12. That is where I see him going. I'm not taking him. I'm not taking him as a top 5 guy. We don't. Hunter Henry of the top 6 guys is the one that makes me nervous because I don't know what the hell Hunter Henry is going to be. I know he is very productive when he plays, but he doesn't play very much. I mean, he does. He has been hurt. He was hurt basically all last season. He missed a couple games the year before. He's just, I know he's the guy this year for that team, the Chargers or whatever, but, he makes me nervous. So I could see Austin Hooper, being better than Hunter Henry this year. I mean, I don't think that's a stretch. But I could also see him finishing as the number 12 tight end because he, doesn't score that many touchdowns or, he doesn't get that many yards because last year yards is what really killed him. So, I think that's all. Everything there is a possibility. But I definitely think he is a top 12 guy, and he's going late. He's going in the 11th round. I've seen him go. I've seen him drop even lower than that in mock drafts. So definitely a guy. If I don't get one of those top 6 guys, I'll wait. I'll wait and take Austin Hooper and be happy with it.
Yeah, I got him at number 14. Right behind Delaney Walker. So with the names that you guys were rattling off, it's pretty accurate. It just in the 12-man league, he's going to be somebody might take a chance on him at the as a starting receiver, but he's probably going to be one of your, if you do a backup tight end, one of your first backups off the board. And I think he'll fill roles. I think if you have a decent tight end or one of the guys that's in that 3 to 6 range that we talked about, after your top 3 studs, he might he might play him back and forth with another guy. He might have better games and stick with the hot hand. He's gonna be steady. I'm not huge on Hooper, but he's definitely someone I would keep an eye on. Like we talked, you mentioned, Steve, that you definitely think his targets are going to go up, and as we said, Ridley's regret. We all think Ridley's going to regress. I think Hooper's targets could go up too. So.
Yeah, I'm not big on Austin Hooper either, honestly. I going in that area, I'd rather take chances on all the other guys. Greg Olsen, I'd probably rather grab. You guys know I love Delaney Walker this year. Trey Burton. I may take Hooper over Burton, but just in that area, I'm almost certainly going to have tight end before Austin Hooper's drafted. So for me, with that being said, I'm kind of out on Hooper because I don't think he's going to be able to repeat what he did last year. Not with the other talented tight end around him, unless tight end becomes basically a graveyard of a position like it was this past year. I don't see Austin Hooper as a number 1 tight end. Any other players on the Falcons you guys want to bring up? I think that
Kadri Allison. If you are a guy that handcuffs players, I wouldn't handcuff Freeman with Ito Smith. I would be more interested in Kadri Allison. I know he's not being drafted. He is an undrafted guy because people don't really know too much about him. But if you watch his game tape in college, he was actually pretty good. He actually played pretty well, in college. So I just didn't see enough out of Ito to make me think that he is definitely the number 2 guy. You know what I mean? I would definitely watch that very closely in, the preseason and see what's going on to know if you're going to take Ito as the direct backup. But Kadri Allison, just watch his tape. He played very well for Pitt. Pitt is known for its running backs. I mean, LaShawn McCoy, and it's known for their running backs. So he is a Pitt running back that I think, has a chance to be pretty good in the NFL if given the opportunity. So just take a flyer on him if you draft early in August and see, look smart if he becomes the number 2 and Freeman gets hurt. He could end up being somebody that really helps you out.
All right, so the next team we're going to get into is the Carolina Panthers. So obviously we know who their quarterback is. He was our MVP about 4 years ago, I think now, maybe 5 actually. Damn, man, that Carolina-Denver Super Bowl seems like ages ago. Cam Newton. Obviously we all know about the shoulder this year. How do you guys feel about him coming into this year? Is there any concern over the shoulder at all? Do you think he's going to have any chance of an Andrew Luck type thing, or is he just going to bypass this, move back into top 10 range?
He is a top 10 quarterback for me. I think he is being drafted ridiculously low. I think that people are really scared off by this shoulder injury, and it doesn't seem to me like it's too serious. I mean, with Andrew Luck, it was a pain thing. He was, I remember reading something about he was saying that there was clicking in there, and there was, he felt like almost like it was pulling when he would throw, when he, went into his throwing motion, and that's a big deal. I haven't heard any of that with Cam. I haven't heard any of that stuff. I know he was throwing a Nerf football in mini camp and, quickly moved up to an NFL football. I think that there's no worries to me about Cam coming from everything that I'm hearing out of camp. He's throwing a football. He's got velocity on his throws. His teammates are saying that he looks like Cam. He doesn't look any different. So, I know it's one of those things where if he takes a big hit, we're gonna have to worry about him re-injuring the shoulder. But I think they are going to make it a point to be like, yo, Cam, listen, at least for the first couple of games of the season, don't be running with reckless abandon. We have running backs. We don't need you to be our running back. We have a very good running back in Christian McCaffrey. Don't be Superman just yet. I mean, if you want to be Superman a couple of games in, go, do your thing, but give it a little bit of time before, make sure you can take a hit before you go out there and running it head on into a 300-pound defensive lineman.
Yeah, that's what kind of scares me. That's what kind of scares me with Cam. Shoulder's not something you can mess with. And, I mean, he takes that one wrong hit, and, one of the big injuries with runners is that falling on that shoulder. I feel like he falls on that shoulder, man, and it's just going to re-aggravate something in there. And like you said, it's a pain thing. And if it starts to be more where he's struggling like he was at the end of last year, where they had to bench him, I mean, it was bad last year. They basically said, look, we just got to get you out of here because we really have no shot at the playoffs. You don't look good, and, we don't need to risk this anymore. So, going into this year, I kind of look at that, and that just – a quarterback in the shoulder, man, it just really, makes me worry, especially with a guy like Cam who likes to run. I mean, it just makes me worry a little bit. Dan, how you feel?
I have Cam ranked 11th, and the shoulder is definitely a concern. I mean, look how long it took Andrew Luck to get back to Andrew Luck status. I mean, the guy missed, practically 2 straight years because of that shoulder injury. He couldn't even throw a football for a year straight, until he was able to, have some kind of movement back in it. But I got him ranked 11th, and he, like he said, he dropped big time because of this injury. But I got to rank. I think he still has top 10 potential being Cam Newton, and if they're saying out of camp that he is looking much more like 2-year ago Cam, 3-year ago Cam, then the upside is for sure there because the guy has a freak of nature. He's got all the intangibles to be a quarterback. I don't know about how smart of it. I'd take other guys over him in the decision making, but talent-wise, an incredible arm, 260-pound body coming at you. I mean, even defenders say when they hit him, it hurts them. So, I mean, you don't get that with a quarterback all the time. And it doesn't hurt having McCaffrey as a check down either. So, I'm probably going to stay away from Cam. But, given his ADP, I think you could take a flyer on him, and he might pan out to be a pretty good pick where he's being drafted at. Good upside.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, right now I understand he looks good. He ain't getting hit right now, so that has the ability to change things, especially in quarterbacks. Man, a lot of them get shell shocked, when they get hit, especially if they're being injured. You look at Carson Wentz last year; he was not bad last year, but he was not as good as he was 2 years ago. Just it's a mental thing, and you got to get used to it. And when you're dealing with pain and getting hit, for a quarterback, to me, it's just that shoulder is just really, really dangerous. McCaffrey, I think we all think he has number one running back upside. Actually, I think through 16 weeks in standard leagues, I think he was the number one running back. Talk about Christian McCaffrey a little bit. Does he see any reduction in workload? Do you think it goes up? I mean, obviously right now, everybody, if you've seen that picture, the dude looks like the Incredible Hulk right now. I mean, he literally looks like he added 20 to 25 pounds of straight muscle onto his body. Do you guys think that he increases that workload, or do you think he gets a reduction, stays the same? Where do you think McCaffrey winds up?
So Christian McCaffrey had 326 touches. I elaborated on this a little bit when we talked about the running back position. So he had 326 touches. The closest person to him on his team was Cam with 101. The closest person to Cam was DJ Moore with 68. So if you take non-quarterback position, guy who touches the ball all the time, and when you're talking about total touches, you're talking about receptions and runs. So Cam's throws don't count when you're talking about total touches. You're talking about touches after the quarterback or touches, after, unable to throw. So, with Cam with 101, you got DJ Moore with 68. From DJ Moore to Christian McCaffrey, you're talking 200 and basically 50 touches. He had 250 touches more than the closest guy to him on his team. That's an insane workload. That's not a big workload. That's insane. That's 44% of the total touches on the team. That's a lot. So, for me, it's a deal where there has to be regression. He's not going to get 107 catches the way he did last year. I mean, that was a record. That's an NFL record. 107 catches for a running back. That's not going to happen again. He had 219 rushing attempts. I could see that number staying consistent around 200, but I see regression in the receptions. So to say that, he had 219 carries and 1,098 rushing yards. So he also had 107 catches for 867 receiving yards. So he had almost 2,000 yard season, total yards. I just don't see that happening again. Especially if Cam is healthy. If Cam is healthy, this is the thing we have to watch for. If Cam Newton is healthy in the preseason, we see Cam Newton's taking hits because they are going to play him in the preseason because they want to see how that shoulder holds up. So if Cam Newton plays in the preseason and we see that he's same old Cam, the reason Christian McCaffrey got a lot of those numbers is the last 4 weeks of the season when Cam was shut down, they used the shit out of Christian McCaffrey. He won people fantasy football titles. Because he was just so used at the end of the season. He saw a crazy amount of touches. The last game of the season, he didn't really play. He had like 4 touches or whatever, but that's week 17. I'm talking about week 12 to week 14. To week 16. He just got an insane amount of touches. So, I don't know. I just see regression for, I actually dropped him out of my top 3. I actually have him at 5, I believe. No, 6 behind Ezekiel Elliott. So, I dropped him out of my top 5 guys. And, I'm a little bit worried about him.
He is the Saquon Barkley for the Carolina Panthers. He is the workhorse. Progression. I'm gonna say similar to last year. I can't see the 107 catches either. They checked it down to him so much last year, and he made a lot of plays happen. But back when go back to college a little bit here, and when you watched Saquon at Penn State, Saquon is a big, strong, freak of nature running back, and when you watched him play, it looked like he was playing with kids. You knew that he was going to take it to the next level in the NFL, which he did last year, which is why he's the number 1 ranked player overall. When you watched Christian at Stanford and he dominated with his quickness and his agility, I said that this is not going to translate to NFL. The guys are too big, they're too strong, they're too fast. They're going to crush him like a peanut, and he's going to be a backup. And I was wrong. Very, very wrong, because he is turning out to be, one of the elite running backs in the league. I think he's definitely top 5. I don't know if I quite would say number 1 overall upside, just because I like Saquon so much, and 1 or 2 other guys. Zeke, I think, just is in a better system for, pure runner. So I do think, those 2 guys, number 1 overall upside for me. But he was impressive last year, and I think that even though the receptions might regress, I think the carries could be in that 200 to 250 range for sure, because he is the legit number 1 back in that offense. Kev?
Yeah, I actually think he has the ability to see the ball more, mainly because of what I said about Cam Newton. I think that they're going to have to protect Cam a little bit, especially at the beginning of the season. I think in the beginning he's going to get a lot of that workload. He's going to, you saw what he got. You saw what he had last year. Last year, the dude had an unbelievable amount of touches and catches, 107 catches. How many, Steve, how many carries did he have last year?
It was 219.
219. See, I can actually see him getting, about 235, 240, and maybe his catches go down to, 95 to 100, maybe even 105. I don't see his catches even really dropping that much because he is that good, and I think he beefed up that way expecting that increase in workload. So for me, I think he has definitely has number one overall running back potential. And if we're not going to count, the team's lack of offense, like against Saquon or David Johnson, you can't count it against Chris McCaffrey as well. So, teams are going to prepare for all those guys. They're elite guys, and they're going to make things happen regardless of how many guys prepare for them, just because of their talent. You see it with, like I said, you've seen it with Barkley. You're going to see it with David Johnson. These are just guys on their team that are just gain all the attention from the defense, and it just doesn't matter. They're that talented. So, talking about the next thing, we're going to get into the wide receivers a little bit. Dan, I'll start with you. DJ Moore versus Curtis Samuel. Which one of those guys do you think has a better value? Do you think that, I think right now, DJ Moore right now is basically going in the 5th, 6th round. Similar to what we talked about Calvin Ridley. Right now, he is going actually in the 5th round at pick 9. Meanwhile, Curtis Samuel is going round 10, pick 10. So 5 rounds later. Which guy do you like the better? Which guy, DJ Moore or Curtis Samuel, do you like their value better?
I think they both got big upside. I think I like Samuel a little bit more. We kind of saw what DJ Moore did. He didn't have a ton of touchdowns last year, and obviously being young and inexperienced, he may come out a little bit more. But they're both 2 young guys that are going to have to mold with Cam, and it's going to be about who Cam's going to have, who's going to develop his chemistry with more. And I just think that I think Samuel's going to be a little more productive. And I think I like the value in him a little more. I think that people are going to jump on DJ Moore. I think even though his ADP is 9, I think you could see him start to go in round 8. In some drafts because he is more popular name. But I think Samuel has just as much ability to produce and have at least a good year, if not better. What do you like, Steve?
Yeah, I completely agree with that analysis. I really don't have much to add there. I think that DJ Moore is a very talented guy that, was, very productive last year. He had 82 targets, 55 catches. He turned those 55 catches into 788 yards, which is a huge, huge number after the catch. I mean, he had a very high yardage, per catch. But when the thing that makes me nervous is, like we've been talking about, we don't know if Cam is going to be able to stick up all season and be able to, play all season. And Curtis Samuel's, missed a couple of games last year. He was targeted 79 times, 39. He had 39 receptions. He had, 494 yards. So he was also a guy who, was very productive after the catch. And, he had some targets in the red zone. He had, I believe, Curtis Samuels had 5 targets inside the 10. So, a guy who was targeted. The only guy that was really targeted more than him was Christian McCaffrey, who played all 16 games, and Devin Funchess. And, Devin Funchess is gone. So, Curtis Samuel also had the second most touchdowns on the team, with 7. So, I don't know. To me, I think Curtis Samuel is definitely the guy I would rather have, especially because I'm nervous about taking DJ Moore where he's going. And I think Samuel could be just as productive 3.5 rounds later.
All right, 3 for 3. If you're getting a guy in the 10th round, Samuel last year, I think, showed a little bit more upside based on those touchdowns than DJ Moore did. Obviously, DJ Moore seemed more like he was a guy getting targeted heavier. A guy, it might be a little better in PPR, but to me, Samuel seems like he's more of a guy that's going to get you into the end zone, which is, really what you're looking for when you're looking at guys. Obviously PPR leagues, DJ Moore is going to be a better player, but he's also going 5 rounds earlier. So I just think the value of Curtis Samuel in round 10 compared to the value of DJ Moore, DJ Moore might be a better player. He might be a more polished receiver, but when we're talking about value, and this is not a heavily used pass, it's not going to be a heavily used pass offense, especially with the questions on Cam. I'd rather take the guy who scores more 5 rounds later than the PPR guy in an offense that's not really throwing the ball that much. So with that being said, we will move on. Greg Olsen, guy that, anybody want to think Greg Olsen has the opportunity to kind of bounce back to 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I mean, he's been hurt the last couple years. Before that, he had that Iron Man streak where he played an ridiculous amount of straight games. So, do you guys think that Greg Olsen has a chance to return to form, or do you think it's just age has caught up with him and he's a little long in the tooth now?
Yeah, long in the tooth, in my opinion. I don't got a whole lot to add on to the Greg Olsen conversation. I think he's coming up on his golden years of playing football.
Yeah, Greg Olsen is a guy who didn't play a whole lot last year, saw 38 targets, 28 receptions, and 291 yards. So, in a tight end premium league, I would think about him because, tight ends are so much more valuable. But other than that, I don't know if I'm taking him in redraft. I'm hoping to have a better tight end than Greg Olsen when he's available. So, I know he could be productive, but, Cam Newton could play all season, or Cam Newton could get hurt. If Cam Newton gets hurt, to me, Greg Olsen loses all value because, I believe it's a Cam Newton, Greg Olsen rapport that it's going to make him relevant. So if Cam Newton's not healthy all year, then to me, he basically becomes irrelevant. So, I'm not going to take that chance. I'm just going to stay away from Greg Olsen.
Yeah, we talked about it with Austin Hooper a little bit around this area. I'm just typically going to be drafting a tight end higher than where I'm going to have to dip in for these guys. If I'm waiting this late on tight end, I'm getting Delaney Walker. I may even reach around for Delaney Walker to make sure that I get him. But of those guys, that's who I'm getting because I've talked him up so much, and it's the guy I'm higher on out of any of those guys going after round 10 that, right now they're falling because they are old, haven't produced, were injured, multiple reasons. But, guys like Jordan Reed, Greg Olsen, these guys have performed in the past, but they get injured. And that's why they're there. And people are drafting for the upside of Evan Ingram and Hunter Henry and O.J. Howard. And so, for me, by the time Greg Olsen is being drafted, I'll just have another tight end by that point. I'll have somebody with a little more upside. So that's pretty much it. Anybody else you guys want to bring up on the Carolina Panthers?
Just the Panthers defense.
Yeah, we should, yeah. I keep forgetting to bring up these defenses, guys, and we have to talk about defenses as irrelevant as they can be.
Yeah. Panthers defense added Gerald McCoy, which I think is a big deal. He's a dominant force on defense. They also added 2 of my favorite players in the draft on the defensive end this year. They drafted Brian Burns out of Florida State, who I really, really like. He's just a really good linebacker. Watch him play. You guys will understand what I'm saying. And the other guy is Christian Miller out of Alabama. You guys probably seen Christian Miller, play a couple of times because Alabama is like on TV all the time. But, linebacker, defensive end, he's an edge rusher, a guy that can put pressure on the quarterback, really strong and quick. So for me, adding those players could make this defense, they lost Thomas Davis. So Brian Burns is going to fill that role like immediately. And, Christian Miller adds a new element of speed on the outside that I think people are really going to, just see how good this kid is. So, I really, really like the Panthers defense this year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm not going to really add any more. Carolina, as long as they got Kuechly in the middle, they're going to be a good defense. He's going to have everybody where they need to be. I love the addition of Gerald McCoy. So, yeah, they're definitely a defense worth drafting. So, with that being the case, we are going to move on now to the New Orleans Saints. We'll start with the Hall of Famer at quarterback, Drew Brees. Right now, Drew Brees is the 7th quarterback off the board. He's going ahead of Carson Wentz, ahead of Kyler Murray, Russell Wilson, Cam Newton, Jared Goff, just to name a few.
Don't do it.
So, right now, do you think Drew Brees is worth that value? He is the 6th pick in the 7th round, 5 picks ahead of Carson Wentz.
Fuck no, I don't. All right, so I love Drew Brees. I am not going to bash Drew Brees. What I am going to say is he was not good last year. He had a lot of touchdowns. You know, he didn't throw for 4,000 yards for the first time since the dawn of time, basically. You know, since God, made the heavens and the earth, Drew Brees has been throwing for 4,000 yards. So it's one of those things where it's like Drew Brees, he's amazing. But to me, there's so many more quarterbacks with more upside than Drew Brees this year that I am not going to be taking Drew Brees. I'm not, he's going in the 7th, 8th round. Fuck no way. I think he has Michael Thomas and really nothing else to, Alvin Kamara and Michael Thomas. That's it. He has those two weapons, and that's it. He doesn't have any other weapons. It's really hard to be a 4,000-yard passer when you add a Latavius Murray and you want to run the ball. You want to run the ball as much as you did last year, and that's what's really hurting him more than anything. They just, I think Traquan Smith, if he develops and is very good, and I'm taking him super late. And it's only because of his upside. I think he does have the upside to become good. The problem is I don't trust Ted Ginn. I don't trust Traquan Smith. That's why I'm taking them late. I'm not taking Ted Ginn at all. But, to me, they don't have another, Cooks. People can say that, adding the tight end, where like Jimmy Graham is going to help. I don't know. Jimmy Graham was an animal when he played with the Saints. So I don't know. I don't think that adding a tight end that had one really good year and has shown nothing else other than last year is really going to help this offense throw for a whole lot more yards. And I'm just staying away from Drew Brees because I hate his ADP. He's just going way too high for the amount of production he put in the second half of the season.
Yeah, Dan, I'm actually going to hop ahead of you because I actually agree with Steve, and I know you are high on Brees. So I'll give you a chance to kind of go against this a little bit. I kind of feel the same way with Drew Brees, almost to the exact degree. I just think that there's no weapons around him. I mean, Traquan Smith had a few blow-up games. Ted Ginn right now, I mean, he's getting up there in age. He's almost a guy that you're, like you said, you're not even drafting now. He's probably drafted in best ball leagues as a great pick in best ball leagues. But, he just doesn't have a lot around him outside of Kamara and Michael Thomas. I wasn't big on Jared Cook last year. I think Jared Cook just got a ton of targets in a Raiders offense that had nothing else. They didn't even have talent on their team that resembled professional football on the Raiders at wide receiver for the Raiders last year. So Jared Cook just got every ball thrown to him possible. I think that's why his numbers were that good. Jared Cook's been around forever. Jimmy Graham was in the prime of his career when he was performing for the Saints back then. And, everybody thought Kobe Fleener was going to be the freaking man when he went to New Orleans. And, pretty much ever since then, dude's been a straight, tight end has been a wasteland in New Orleans. So I can't really see Jared Cook providing too much more to Drew Brees' arsenal. And therefore, I have Drew Brees ranked right now number 11. I'm just not high on him, and I definitely drafted him ahead of a few of those names that I mentioned.
I think everybody needs to stop waiting for the clip with Brees and Brady because who knows when it's coming. I mean, I know we got this thing on Facebook going around with the old filters, and guess what? We may see these guys play looking like those pictures because they're still playing at an extremely high level. Brees had 74.4% completion percentage last year. He was 8 yards short of 4,000 yards. 32 touchdowns, 5 interceptions, and a rating of 115.7, which I think was just behind Mahomes. So the guy, there was a lot of, Kamara was a big name on that team. Obviously, he took over as the top guy, the top name being drafted, obviously. But Breeze is still producing. I mean, he's still producing at a top 10 quarterback status. I got to give the guy credit until he proves that he's finally, ready to put up mediocre stats, because he's still putting up much better stats than most of these other guys. I know that the upside might be there for a lot of these younger guys. I mean, I obviously put Carson Wentz ahead of him because I think Carson's younger and has a much, much better arsenal around him for sure. But you can't knock Breeze's a couple of his stars. I mean, he doesn't have the tight end of Ertz, and he doesn't have some of the the speed that these other teams have. But I still think he's gonna, until he proves us wrong, he's still gonna get a check in my book.
Yeah, so with that being the case, let's move on to Alvin Kamara. Sorry, guys, I was just doing a little research in here, so
nope, you're good.
No pause. So we'll move on to Alvin Kamara. I mean, Alvin Kamara, we talked about Christian McCaffrey. We had our NFC East podcast where we talked about Zeke and Saquon. So we're going to pretty much run through the top 4 guys rather quickly. Alvin Kamara, what do you think his workload increases this year with no Mark Ingram? Do you think Murray just kind of slides into this role? How do you guys feel about Kamara and his potential to be number 1 overall?
I think we finally see the season where Kamara has over 200 rushing attempts. I think we see over 200 rushing attempts, and I think we see over 90 catches. The one thing about Mark Ingram that he was able to do is was used in the passing game. He wasn't used as much as Kamara, obviously, because Kamara is just a much better receiver out of the backfield. But Latavius Murray is not a receiver out of the backfield, period, at all. Not even a little bit. Nothing. He gives you 0 in the passing game. So, to me, I have in PPR Kamara number 1. I think he receives all the passing down work. I don't think, Latavius Murray is used in that role at all. And I think he sees over 200 carries. And this is the season I have been waiting for this kid. I have been waiting for this kid to see 200 to 225 carries and all the receiving work. And I think that's what's going to happen this year. I love him in PPR. He is my favorite running back. I draft him. If I am a top 3 pick, I've been getting him every time. Whether I'm 1, 2, or 3, I take Kamara, and I'm happy. I'm laughing to the bank because I think this kid is going to be money this year.
Yeah, I have him 3rd overall, and I know when we talked about Carolina, I said that I don't quite, as high as I am on McCaffrey, and you have to be high on McCaffrey with, his talent, but I said I don't think he has the number 1 overall potential. Alvin Kamara for sure has number 1 overall potential, even though I have Saquon and Zeke ahead of him. If Kamara finishes number 1 overall, it doesn't shock me one bit. If Kamara finishes number 1 overall the next 10 years, it doesn't shock me. The kid is lightning. He's filthy. He play running, receiving out of the backfield. He does everything, and he makes it look easy. I mean, some of these other receivers, Zeke, who's just hard nosed, up the middle, helmet in the chest. This kid, his moves are unlike just about anybody in the league, and I like what Steve said. If you give him 200 carries, he's gonna get 125 targets, if not more. I mean, he's constantly checking down, and Drew Brees is, creates time in the pocket, so he's going to have an incredible year. I mean, barring injury, this kid is there's no question that he's top 3 stats at the end of the year.
Dude, we just got done talking about what we expect out of McCaffrey, or what we would like to see out of McCaffrey as far as touches. Dude, if Kamara sees that, he is undoubtedly going to be the number 1 running back. He will be the number 1 player in fantasy if he sees the amount of work that Christian McCaffrey is seeing. I just don't know if that's the case. I don't remember really the last time New Orleans used a one running back system. They've always kind of dipped into their second running back. I do agree, Steve, that Murray just doesn't have the receiving capability of Mark Ingram. If you look at Murray's history, last year he got a lot of time as the number one running back in Minnesota, and he still only had 26 targets in the receiving game. I mean, he just doesn't get targeted. He's not a receiving back. The most he saw was 43 3 years ago in Oakland. And even then, 43 targets, and he was the guy there. I think they still had Jalen Richard, so he's probably seeing a little bit of the passing work, most of the passing work. It just shows that he's not a receiving back. So I think Kamara is going to be the every down passing back, and probably 60 to 75% on the field for running plays. And if that's the case, man, he's going to see, yes, upward of 200 carries, potentially 100 catches. And if he is able to do that, he will be the number one running back in fantasy football. That being the case, I think we kind of all agree. We talked about Murray. My question with Murray is, do you think he slides into Mark Ingram's role, or obviously we kind of talked about it when we talked about Kamara. We kind of think that he's just going to be a secondary running back almost.
Just a breather for Kamara. That's basically all I think he's going to be. Just let him get a wind and then just pop him back out. He's not going to be anything relevant. Just give Kamara a breather.
Yep. Yeah, so I don't think we really need to expand on Latavius Murray anymore. I mean, he is getting drafted right now, I believe, in the 7th or 8th round. Where's he getting drafted at right now? Latavius Murray currently is going in round 7 at pick 8. If you want to take a shot, maybe Kamara gets an injury. Maybe all this extra workload gets Kamara an injury. Maybe you think that maybe you have a little bit more faith that Latavius Murray will take over that Mark Ingram role. Last year, Mark Ingram, from week 5 when he came back after the suspension to week 16, Mark Ingram was the number 20 running back in the NFL in PPR leagues. He was a running back too. So if you think that Latavius Murray can, kind of just slide into that role, 7th round is not a bad spot to grab a running back too. But I just don't think either of us, think he's sliding right into that, that Mark Ingram role. Michael Thomas. Do you guys think Michael Thomas has number 1 wide receiver potential?
No, I don't. I think okay, so my issue with Michael Thomas is so last year he saw 147 targets. He caught 125 of them. Like, let that sink in. He literally, out of 147 targets, caught 125. That's only 22 targets that he missed. That is an insane number. That is
not replicable.
Yeah, it's not something that can be repeated. That was just don't get me wrong, I think he's still going to be a very high rate of catch guy, but that is just sick. Think about if he had 200 targets and he stayed on that pace. He would have had 200 targets and caught 170 of them. You know what I mean? Like, he would have broken the single season receiving record by 30 some catches. You know what I mean? Like, that's insane to even think about. So, no, I don't think he has number 1 upside. He's been consistently basically the 8th or 9th wide receiver in PPR leagues every year. I think last year was his best season, and what was he? Did he finish 6th, Kev? I think he finished 6th overall or something like that.
Last year he was the number 6, yes, in PPR, number 6 overall.
Yeah, so 6th overall. The year before that he was 8, and the year before that he was 9. I think that's kind of where he's going to lay. He's going to be between 6 and 9. That's where he's going to finish. He's just on an offense that he's definitely the number 1 target. There's no question. But I just don't think. I think Drew Brees spreads the ball around. The past couple of years he has nobody but Michael Thomas and Alvin Kamara to throw to, so he's been using those guys. But I think they're going to try to get Traquan Smith more involved. They're going to try to get Cook more involved. I think his targets will go, down maybe a little bit or stay right where they're at, 140 to 150. I don't think he's going to get any more targets than that. So no, I don't think he has number one upside.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I mean, as much as I talked up, Drew Brees and how I, don't quite see him having regression yet. You said it right, Steve. He does move the ball around too much. He's always been that way as a quarterback, which has made him, as great as he is. But I don't see that amount of catches to targets being replicated. That was just insane. And B, I just don't think that he's quite as good as your Julio Jones, Hopkins, and Adams. I just think that those guys are another level. We talk about the big three names of tight ends. I think those are your big three names of receivers. And I just don't think Michael Thomas is cracking into their tier of excellence as good as Michael Thomas is. And, I mean, I think, I have him 4. I think he's going to – I wouldn't be surprised if he ended up, in that 6 range again, overall PPR. So I think he's going to be a very good receiver, definitely top 10, probably closer to that 6 number. But for me, he's not going to be number 1 overall potential.
Yeah, it's going to be hard, I think, too. Break into that with that catch percentage. One thing where he can kind of balance himself out is touchdowns. He's kind of like Julio, where he has not received a double-digit touchdown season yet. So, if he's able to score like Devontae Adams or DeAndre Hopkins, I mean, he has that type of talent. He has that type of, upside in him for double-digit touchdowns. So if he's able to break into that, he can honestly deal with, he scores 4 more touchdowns. You're talking about 24 catches in PPR leagues. Correct? Was that about? Yeah, 4 more touchdowns. You're talking about 24 catches in PPR leagues. So, even if he did, and that would probably make his catch percentage worse than what it was the previous year. So I wouldn't even say, he ain't dipping that much. And if he scores 4 extra touchdowns, he's, do I think he has number 1 potential? Yes, I do. Because we talked about how there's nobody else around him. And if God help me, if Kamara gets hurt, there's nothing on that offense that's going to take away from Michael Thomas. If anything, it may make it harder for him because there ain't nobody to take away attention. But I think this dude's super talented enough to make plays in that situation. And Drew Brees is definitely not going to be the guy that's going to hesitate to throw it to him. So I definitely think Michael Thomas has number 1 receiver upside just based on the fact that he has the potential to score 5 to 6 more touchdowns this year. With nobody in that offense outside of Kamara.
Yeah, real quick. His targets inside the red zone, he scored 6 red zone touchdowns. Well, 6 touchdowns inside the 10, but he had 14 targets inside the 10. He caught 12 of those. So, that's if we remember, Julio had 7 targets inside the red zone, and they basically scored the same amount of touchdowns. So to me, that just means he's getting targeted. Obviously, he's getting targeted inside the red zone. He's just not scoring. So I think it's a deal where
that could be an unlucky thing. Maybe he catches the ball on the 1 and isn't able to stretch the ball out.
Exactly, and that has to be the case because he had like I said, 14 targets, 12 receptions. So had to be a case where he's getting tackled.
The catches than Julio did.
Yes, and he had like I said, like you just said, he had double the targets inside the red zone and only scored 1 more touchdown. So like I said, I just don't think I think it's just something we're going to disagree on, but I just don't see number 1 upside for him. I don't think that number goes up. 14 targets inside the 10 is a lot, so I don't see that number going up. But it's definitely. It's an eye-opening thing when you look at it. It's like, wow, he got a lot of targets inside the red zone and didn't score.
Sure did. All right, so we talked about him a little bit. Jared Cook gets into the Saints team at tight end. I think me and Steve got into it. Dan, how do you feel about Jared Cook?
I do not think he puts up the numbers he did last. I mean, in the dumpster fire shit show of Oakland, that was Oakland last year. He was the one bright spot out there, but I don't see another 900 yard, 6 touchdown season from Jared Cook. I mean, it would baffle my mind. As good as Drew Brees is, one of the all time greats, I just think that I think Carr relied on him and got comfortable with him, and they found a rhythm. He's in a new system now, and he's getting older. I don't think he's gonna have a bad season. I think he's a consistently decent tight end, but he's not putting up those numbers he put up last year.
Yeah, I agree. So just looking at what we're looking at with the tight end position with the Saints. So they had Ben Watson last year. I think we all can agree Ben Watson is extremely long-toothed. he's been in the league.
It's a corpse.
Yeah, he's been in the league longer than air has been on Earth. It's one of those things. It seems to me Ben Watson's been in the league since 1903, and he just ain't never leaving.
Him and Brady walked into the Patriots locker room together.
Yeah, for real. And so I don't know. He had 46 targets.
Have a bet. You have to have a bet.
Exactly. You're definitely gonna retire before me, bro. Just letting you know. But yeah, it's Ben Watson 46 targets. Josh Hill had 24 targets. So if you add those two up, you're talking about 70 targets. I think Cooks could get 70 targets. My thing is, I just don't think Cooks is good. I think last year, like we've all said, it's his outlier season. You think about the quarterbacks this dude has had, right? He has had, Derek Carr last year. I don't think Derek Carr is anything special, but he's a guy. But he has had Aaron Rodgers to throw the ball to, him. He's had good quarterbacks throughout his career, and just has never been good until last season, where literally the Raiders had absolutely nothing, and he was basically their guy. They didn't have a choice. He was their guy. So, I think with the Saints, if he gets 70 targets, Watson had 35 catches, Hill had, I think, 19 catches. So, he could be a 50-catch guy and, be, I guess, a top 12 or close to it. But I'm not sold that he's going to be somebody that I really want to have on my fantasy team. He could just be okay.
Yeah, last year he had the most catches, most targets, most yards, and most touchdowns, of any other season in his career. It was just a year for Jared Cook. He wound up in the perfect position because, like we said, Oakland had nobody. Right now his value is he is going in the 7th round at pick 5. Way too early for me. If I'm waiting that long, bring up the name again. I'm waiting probably for Delaney Walker if I'm waiting that long. So, by that time, I still hope to have a tight end. I've been saying I would rather draft the top 3. If I'm not getting the top 3, I'd rather try and get Evan Ingram in end of round 4 or 5 or beginning round 5. So that's kind of been how I'm doing it. And if I'm waiting, I'm reaching on Delaney Walker. So that's pretty much been the direction I've gone in every mock draft that I've done. And yeah, I'm just not a fan of Jared Cook. I just think last year was an anomaly. So with that being the case, we'll talk about 2 guys later. Traquan Smith is obviously a late-round flyer. Ted Ginn Jr. is, really not being drafted at all in many mock drafts. Do you think either of these guys are – do you think any of these guys are worth a flyer on? Obviously Traquan's being drafted, so he probably would be more of the flyer. But which one of these guys has a better chance of blowing up?
Yeah, it's Traquan. I think that's pretty simple to say. I don't think that's a stretch. Drew Brees still is Drew Brees. You know what I mean? I don't think he's a bad quarterback. I just don't think they have weapons. You know what I mean? I think that they are, and their defense actually is better this year. If you're looking at their defense I think got better this year. So I don't think they need to boat race teams. I think, 24 points a game is going to get them a win. You know what I mean? They got Malcolm Brown. They just, I don't know. It just, to me, this is a team that is going to be a good team. And I don't think they need Drew Brees to throw for 5,000 yards. So I don't think he's going to. I think they're going to preserve, I think they last year realized they needed to preserve him kind of like, what the Patriots do with Tom Brady. I don't think Tom Brady goes crazy in the beginning of the season either. He normally starts off slow. So I think it's the same deal. But Traquan Smith, if he does see double of his targets from last year, which was 44, let's say he says 80, he could have 50 catches and have a much more productive season than he had last year, and he's worth, a late round flyer.
Yeah, definitely worth a late round flyer. I touched on him when we talked about our wide receiver podcast a little while back, and I actually picked him as a guy that I thought that could be someone to keep an eye on this year. I thought he had a couple good solid games last year. He showed potential, and basically like when we did Atlanta, we talked of you brought up Sanu. We all basically agreed that what you're going to get out of Sanu. You're going to get a mediocre couple catch guy. I mean, that's basically what you're getting with Ted Ginn Jr. I mean, you're not getting anything more than probably 400, maybe 500 yards if you're lucky, and a few touchdowns. And if you have a choice between him and Traquan has potential to get that 80, 90 targets, then you got to definitely take the guy with the upside.
Yeah, for sure. I think he's one of the best late round flyers there is at his draft position. Right now, it's the 14th round, first pick in the 14th round. I think that's a crazy good flyer. He showed he can have those big games. He's obviously a speedster, a deep threat. So he's going to be kind of your Deshaun Jackson type, where if you draft him, he's not going to give you a week in, week out, big game, but you're basically hoping maybe 1 out of every 3, 1 out of every 4 games he has, 112 yards and a touchdown on 4 or 5 catches. It's that would be his blow up game. And for a guy going in at the end of the draft in the 14th round, it's a great flyer. And really the only reason why he kind of fell off last year, I believe, he had 2 big games right in a row, and then he kind of sustained an injury, and after that he just never was able to get healthy again and kind of just slowed up for the rest of the year. So if this guy's able to stay healthy, he's going to be a great late round flyer to take. So, yeah, I agree with you guys. I think he's one of the best to take later on. So that would conclude our New Orleans team. We'll move on to Tampa Bay right now. Tampa Bay, we'll start with Mike Evans. Mainly because I love Mike Evans. Okay, I think Mike Evans, especially this year, I think he has the chance to be the number 1 receiver. I really do. If everything goes right in this offense the way it could, they're going to have to throw the ball a ton. Their running backs, neither one of their running backs showed anything last year. So with that being the case, I think that they're going to have to literally just air it out. Their defenses did not show a lot. They lost Joe McCoy, so their defense is just terrible as well. And they're basically so. Look, I could see Mike Evans literally seeing anywhere. I can see Mike Evans seeing the area of 170 to 180 targets this year. I can see him. Last year, his struggle was touchdowns. I did not pull up the cheat code, so I will do that really quick.
Yeah, 138 targets, 86 receptions.
8 touchdowns.
8 touchdowns.
Okay.
1,524 yards. Big year.
Yeah, and if you look at his red zone targets, he had less red zone targets than Julio Jones last year. Julio Jones had 7. This guy had 6. This guy's one of the biggest leapers in the NFL. Like, he's just a massive receiver. I think that number goes nowhere but up. He caught a lot of deep balls. He was dealing with Ryan Fitzpatrick, so even their red zone opportunities were not really high, because if you look at Ryan Fitzpatrick, you're either getting a big play out of him or you're getting stopped at the 40-yard line and having to punt. Ryan Fitzpatrick's not a quarterback that's sustaining drives. He's hitting you with big plays, those Fitzmagic plays, or he's getting shut down. So they really didn't get a lot of red zone opportunities, and I just think this year with Bruce Arians, I've talked a lot about Bruce Arians being the coach there and the system that he brings. It's been talented. It worked in Pittsburgh. It worked in Indianapolis. It worked in Arizona. This guy just knows how to coach football. And for me, putting Jameis Winston in that system with Mike Evans, if you look at Larry Fitzgerald, Bruce Arians extended Larry Fitzgerald's career by 5-6 years now. because he moved them around the slot, moved them, basically, put him in the middle of the field where he can just run little stop routes, little, hitching in routes, stuff like that, just preserved his career. He's not going down the field as much. He's not putting a lot of wear and tear on his body. I think you can see a lot of that even with Mike Evans, moving around into the slot, moving him to the outside, just because of the type of receiver Mike Evans is. Like I said, I think he has the potential to be the number one receiver this year. Do I think it will happen? No. I don't have him ranked that way, but his potential to me is that I think 3 years ago he was number 3, or 2 years ago he was the number 3 receiver in the NFL in PPR. So, yeah, I think the guy's got a ton of upside. I love Mike Evans. Great second-round pick, by the way.
Yep, I like Mike Evans a lot. I think me and you are eye to eye on this one. Me and Kev have talked a lot about the Buccaneers and how we love that passing offense this year. We like Jameis. We like, Godwin. We like Evans. We like OJ. We like everybody. I just like that entire team. So I'm not going to elaborate too much. I just think Mike Evans has all the upside in the world in an Arians offense as the number 1 receiver, and definitely has top 5 upside.
I like Mike Evans, obviously for obvious reasons. He's extremely talented, and most importantly, that defense is so bad, and that run game may be even worse than the defense. So they will be hauling the ball out, and we know back as early as his Florida State days, Jameis likes to throw the ball. He can definitely throw the ball as many times as you need him to in a game. So, when you got 2 guys like Godwin and Evans on the outside, there's going to be plays to be made. So, number 1 overall upside for me, probably not, but I could see him without question cashing in on top 5. Would not surprise me with as many times as that, this Tampa Bay team needs to throw the ball, and Arians, he's no shy guy to, making a couple trick plays and running an offense based off air attack. So, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if you look at, I'm just going to if you look back on 2016, that was the year he was the number 3 receiver in fantasy, or actually he was number 4. I'm sorry, but he had 96 catches that year. That was his most catches he received. He also received 173 targets that year. Last year he only got 139. Like I said, I just think it was a lot more about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers not sustaining drives, big plays happening throughout the team, and he only scored 8 touchdowns that year. He scored 12. So if you're able to give this guy another 34 targets and 4 touchdowns, I just think the guy he has the ability to have an outstanding season. He's a guy that's been consistent over the past 3 years. I love Mike Evans. So with that being the case, we'll move into the other receiver that last year showed a lot of potential, and this year, he's one of those guys going in that 5th round with DJ Moore and, a little after Kenny Golladay, probably around Cooper Kupp, somewhere in that range is Chris Godwin. This guy has a chance for a breakout season in a lot of people's eyes. How do you guys feel about Chris Godwin, his potential, his chances to break out this year?
Yeah, so podcast is running a little long, so I'm going to be very quick with it. I think Chris Godwin has definitely 80 catch upside. Bruce Arians said this, you can't really trust what Bruce Arians has to say. If you guys remember a couple of years back when he had David Johnson, he said David Johnson was going to get the ball 30 times a game. This year now he's saying that Chris Godwin is going to be a 100-catch receiver. I just don't see Chris Godwin getting the amount of targets it will take for him to get 100 catches. So, for me, he's not going to be a 100-catch receiver. Last year, he was only 95 targets. I could see his targets going up to like 120, this year, which to me makes him an 80-catch receiver. With 95 targets last year, he only caught 59 balls. So if he gets up to 120 targets, which I definitely see happening, he could be an 80-catch receiver. He's definitely not going to be a 100-catch receiver. So 80 catches... with his total yardage from last year, which was, 824, I could definitely see, Chris Godwin having 1,000 yards and 80 catches with, I would say anywhere from 6 to 9 touchdowns. I don't think he gets into double digits. I think he's just shy of that. But definitely, great WR2.
Yeah, Chris Godwin's going to have a good year. I think all those numbers you shot off were pretty accurate, pretty much right where I would be at, Steve. Like 7 to 8 touchdowns, maybe 1,000 yards receiving. But there's going to be a 100-yard receiver on that team, but it's going to be Evans. They're going to throw the ball a ton, but I don't think Godwin hits the 100 receptions. I don't think you have enough room to have 200-yard receivers on that team unless they're really, unless Winston's throwing the ball 600-700 times this year. But I could see 70-80 catches, crack 1,000 yards, 70 touchdowns. I mean, for the value that you're going to get him at in the 5th round, that's excellent value for where he's being taken. And I have him as my very late keeper in the 3 of our leagues. So I'm especially hoping that this guy blows up because he showed a ton of potential last year. He was a fun kid to watch.
All right, so yeah, he's one of those third-year wide receivers. A lot of people talk about third-year wide receivers and that third year being their breakout season. The thing that scares me is the touchdowns. I think that his touchdowns, he get, I believe, 14 targets. I think I saw on the cheat codes. No, 11. I'm sorry, 11 targets inside the 10. 4 catches in that span. Like he just got targeted way too much in the red zone, I feel like, compared to what is going to happen this year. I think that those targets may come down where Mike Evans goes up. OJ Howard also wasn't there last year for 5 games and was kind of injured throughout the season, so I think his targets in the red zone go up. OJ Howard last year had 4 targets in the red zone. So that's my fear with Chris Godwin, is that maybe his touchdowns come from like 7 to 5 or 4 or 5. But his catch percentage is probably going to go up. 59 out of 95 is not very, right around 66%. And I think he might be able to bring that up to 70, 72%. Having Jameis there all year, who I think is he's a little bit better of a quarterback than Fitzpatrick, a lot more talent at least. So I think his catch percentage may go up. Touchdowns may go down. But I just, his targets, 95 targets is a ton of targets. And I know they lost a lot. They lost, if you look at their targets last year, Deshaun Jackson had 41. Adam Humphries had 76. That's 117 targets that are going to be open for receiving. So, obviously, OJ Howard only had 34. His number is probably going to be 60 or 70 of that, of that number. But it ought to be interesting to see where that other 47 goes. Does Godwin take it, or do they just air it out to Mike Evans? I'm more thinking of Mike Evans that is going to get a lot of that remainder. And so for me, Chris Godwin, last year he was number 34 receiver in PPR leagues. I think that's maybe he cracks into that top 30. I just don't see him as a wide receiver 2, mainly because I think OJ Howard's going to be a better player, and I expect a huge season out of Mike Evans. So I think Godwin kind of is what he was last year, which isn't bad. I mean, he's definitely, you're getting a very good player who was very productive last year. But like I said, I think the touchdowns could come down, but catches could go up. So next we're going to talk about OJ Howard. He's a tight end, one of them in that second tier with Hunter Henry and Evan Ingram that's going. And I think right now he is the 5th tight end being drafted. He is the 4th tight end being drafted right now, according to Fantasy Calculator. To me, I know that's where you have him, Steve. I don't have him there. I have him at number 5. But yeah, how do you guys feel about OJ Howard? His chances to break out.
I'll just touch real quick. I mean, I know Steve wants to talk about him a little more because he's a little higher on him, but he definitely has. He could crack in the top 3. I mean, he's got all the right stuff around him for sure. I just don't know if he's got the talent that the top three tight ends do have. But for me, he's in that fifth range. Him and I got Ingram at 4, but him and who's that? Ebron, number 4, number 5, number 6. So he's going to get a lot of work. Basically, is what it's going to come down to. They're going to use him a lot, and I just think I think he's going to have a big year.
Yeah. So OJ Howard, like I said, every year of his career, this is going into year 3, he has had 16 yards per catch. He's a 16-yard per catch average player at the tight end position. That is
phenomenal.
Yes, that's unbelievable. That is an unbelievable number for a tight end. That's Gronkowski, that's Kelsey, that's those names are what you're talking about in that range of yards per reception. So for me, I don't see how this guy doesn't be awesome this year. If he plays all 16 games, to me it's a no-brainer that he is a top 4 tight end. Could even be a top 3 tight end. I love this kid. I love his potential. I think he is just an absolute beast. He is one of my favorite tight ends to watch play football. You're talking about a guy who scored 5 touchdowns on 34 targets. So he's used in the red zone area. He can catch an 80-yard touchdown. He caught an 80-yard touchdown against the Eagles this past year. So, he has that ability to break long touchdown runs also as a tight end. And then to me, that's very rare. That's very rare to have in a tight end. If you can have a tight end that can catch and run for an 80-yard touchdown, that's unheard of. Like, what other tight ends can you even think of that can do that? It's a very rare breed of tight end that can do that. So to me, this kid has all the upside in the world. Last year he saw 4 targets inside the 10. He caught 3 of those targets, and all 3 of them were touchdowns. So, to me, if if they decide, okay, we're going to get away from Cameron Brate and we're just going to use O.J. Howard as our tight end because he can block his ass off too. So like I was telling you guys, great tight ends are the ones that can pass catch and block, and he can block his ass off. So to me, he has all the upside in the world, and I love this kid. I'm taking him every chance I get.
Yeah, I know you're higher. Out of those 3 guys, I like Evan Ingram the most. So, I'm shooting for Evan Ingram, but if I don't get Evan Ingram, I'm trying to get O.J. Howard before Hunter Henry. My one fear that I brought up was in the tight end podcast. Arians just never really used a tight end like that in his system, but I think O.J. Howard is talented enough that Arians is smart enough that he's going to get O.J. Howard involved a little bit more. And like I said, dude only saw 34 targets last year. There's 117 available. I think out of that number, 60 to 70 can go to O.J. Howard. So, definitely a guy that, if you don't get those top 3, is a good fallback plan. We'll get into the running backs. Not really much to talk about with the running backs. One of them is draftable. You don't. They didn't show a lot last year. Neither one of them. There was not a lot to be overwhelmed with or happy about. So, Dan, I'll start with you. Peyton Barber or Ronald Jones Jr., which one of those guys would you be more high on, or one of those guys are you picking?
I think Peyton Barber definitely has more potential. He had a decent year. Not a great year, like you said. He had a decent year last year. Didn't have a lot of touchdowns, only 5 touchdowns. But, I actually picked up Ronald Jones off of waivers, and I had him on my bench. I was kind of, when they start to give him the work midway through the season, a little more work to see what he was capable of. He just kind of like when I picked up Ito Smith, both of those guys I had there, and just neither of them did anything to just wow you. They were below mediocre, young guys that, maybe one of the two will have a better season, maybe in the future have better games. But I'm just because I had them, so I was closer to them last year. And I just, I got the stat line. These are guys that not many people are really watching. And since they were on my bench, I was watching the stat lines from them to see if they were going to be worth starting at a time or two. But they just, Jones never did anything special. He was very, very below average. And I just think Peyton Barber definitely showed a lot more. So I think that he's definitely the go-to guy as far as running back in that role.
Yeah, right now, Ronald Jones has an ADP of round 8, pick 4. Peyton Barber's going in the 11th round at pick 10. Looking at those two draft positions, obviously more people are higher on Ronald Jones. He just did not show anything last year at all. Dan, you're 100% right with that. Steve, which one of those guys would you be more adept to drafting if you had to draft one of them?
I didn't like Ronald Jones coming out of college. I don't think he does any. I wrote this in his player profile. He doesn't do anything special. He's not good at any one thing. He doesn't catch the ball well. He doesn't run exceptionally well. He, to me, benefited from a good offensive line in college, and he just it wasn't nothing ever special. I didn't see anything that wowed me when I watched Ronald Jones play in college. And last year, the dude had just listen. This is I had to check it twice because I wasn't sure how accurate this was, and I was kind of like, what the hell?
Read it to me. I was there. I want to hear this. I lived this.
Yeah, the dude had 23 rushing attempts and 41 yards.
How is his ADP that good? And are they really that high on him? Do they think that this offense is going to be some juggernaut where he's going to get goal line carries? I don't.
It's Bruce Arians. That's the only thing that can help.
I guess so.
That's literally that's a laughable stat. That really is. It's really funny. I don't know. To me, to have 2
yards to carry.
It's 2 yards to carry. And this is the other thing. To be an NFL running back and to have the season that he had he not been drafted in the second round, he would have been cut by any team. Literally, if he was a third or fourth round pick, I guarantee you he'd be cut. With what he showed on tape last year, he looked completely clueless. He had no idea what he was doing. He was a complete liability when he was back there and passing on the pass rush. He did not block anyone. He looked like he was completely lost, had no idea what he was doing. So to me, it is a no-brainer that you're taking Peyton Barber in the 11th round. And if you are one of those people that is drafting Jones thinking that he is going to be something this year, I feel very sorry for you because you are wasting your 8th round pick.
Yeah, if I had to draft one of those guys, it's probably Peyton Barber just because of the draft value. I'm not wasting an 8th round pick on these Tampa Bay running backs last year. According to PFF, their offensive line was number 20 in the NFL. That's not a very good offensive line. Ronald Jones apparently gained 13 pounds of muscle from what the word is around their camp. That doesn't always necessarily lead to fantasy production or pro football production. Just because you add muscle does not mean that you are an intelligent player that's going to all of a sudden pick up the blocking schemes and the route running concepts out of the backfield and even have good enough vision to hit the right hole. If you got a guy that's averaging 1 yard per carry, he's just not. He doesn't have the vision, and gaining weight is not going to add the speed, and he's not even really a good catcher out of the backfield. So this guy just has, maybe Bruce Arians finds a way to make this guy relevant, but as an 8th round pick, he's definitely not a guy I'm drafting. With that being said, we are going to get into my favorite quarterback to draft this year due to his fantasy draft value and just my hype on the offense and my hype in the the Bruce Arians system is Jameis Winston. Right now, Jameis Winston is being drafted as the number 13th quarterback with at an ADP of round 10. I have him ranked as my number 8 quarterback. I think here he has all the upside in the world in this Bruce Arians system. Bruce Arians is the tailor-made coach for Jameis Winston's skill set. He has the talent around him. So therefore, I love Jameis Winston, and I'm not hesitating to draft him and wait on drafting him until the 10th round.
Yeah, he's definitely one of the best draft values that you can get this year. He is a guy that, the only thing that you can say about Jameis Winston that is not good is his turnover ratio. He turns the ball over a lot. He fumbles a lot. He throws interceptions a lot. I think, with Bruce Arians' system, he's still going to throw interceptions. It's just, no risk it, no biscuit. That's Bruce Arians' thing. Kevin has said it 100 times. That's the way he likes his quarterbacks. And Jameis Winston ain't scared to fire it in there. But I'll tell you what, with this offense, he's going to throw for a lot of yards this year. If he threw for 4,700 yards this year to 5,000 yards this year, I would not be surprised. It would not be a shock to me at all. I think I kind of have him projected for 4,500 yards and 32 touchdowns. I think that's basically how I feel what Jameis Winston is going to do. So for me, Jameis Winston is a quarterback that I love getting late because I think he's going to be very good this year.
I have him. I think Kev said he was 13th ranked quarterback, and that's exactly where I have him. So I guess I'm, agreeing of the ADP. Do I think that I don't like the turnovers. You look at him every year. It always seems like he's kind of not up there in leading turnovers. Not always leading the NFL, but he is definitely amongst the top leaders in all around turnovers, not just interceptions. But he's got good upside. We've kind of, all three of us have basically just praised him, how explosive this offense could be with the weapons. And obviously Arians coming in, taking over. So even though I have him ranked 13th, if he cracked the top 10 for me, I don't think he's cracking the top 5, but if he cracked the top 10 for me, I wouldn't be surprised. But I ranked him right outside of 12 because I think there's 12 starting quarterbacks that I would prefer over him. But definitely potential with an offense like this. He just has to watch the turnovers because it doesn't sustain drives when you turn the ball over as much as he does.
All right. Any other Tampa Bay Buccaneers you guys want to discuss?
Nope, I'm good.
Oh, okay. So, with that being said, we will get into. We're not out of touch with football, guys. We will get into the Melvin Gordon news when we talk about the AFC West. Our divisional podcasts are going a little bit longer than we wanted to, and so adding content to it is not really beneficial. We could probably just wait until we talk about those divisions. Zeke, we will talk about at a later time as well, especially if that issue does arise, where it is he could be holding out as well. And Steve has done a little research on that could be, kind of an interesting fact in that potential holdout. But that being the case, we're going to sign off for tonight. So remember, if you're listening, check us out on the website. Just launched it about a month ago now. It is www.fourthandinchesff.com. Is www.4thandinchesff.com. Bunch of content, articles, blogs, player profiles, and of course our draft guide. And hit that subscribe button, give us a 5-star rating. And with that being said, peace out, guys.
Peace out.
All right. See you next time.
We were